I was standing in the foyer of the house I had called home for 37 years when my daughter Victoria looked me straight in the eyes and said the words that would haunt me forever. "Get out of my house. You have no right to anything." Her voice was cold, calculated, without a trace of the little girl I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. The movers she had hired were already carrying my belongings to the curb, like I was nothing more than an unwanted tenant being evicted. Can you imagine being discarded by your own child after dedicating your entire life to their success and happiness? What would you do if the daughter you raised suddenly treated you like a stranger who had overstayed their welcome? I stood there in shocked silence, watching 37 years of memories being boxed up and thrown away. But I already knew that within 24 hours, my response would forever change the destiny of our family. What Victoria didn't know was that her arrogance would become her greatest weakness. My name is Caroline Winthrop. I am 62 years old, and until that devastating moment, I was a retired corporate lawyer who had spent the last decade of my life caring for my ailing husband Richard. I had given up my partnership at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, to nurse him through his final battle with cancer. For 3 years, I watched the love of my life waste away while Victoria was too busy building her social media influencer career to visit her dying father more than twice. When Richard passed away 6 months ago, I was not just grieving the loss of my husband, I was financially devastated. The medical bills had drained our savings, the house was mortgaged to pay for experimental treatments, and my law career was a distant memory. Victoria knew all of this. She knew I had sacrificed my financial security and professional future to care for her father. She knew I had nowhere else to go. But what she didn't know was that Richard and I had been married for 38 years, and in all that time, I had learned to read people's intentions like an open book. The way she avoided eye contact during her father's funeral, the hurried whispers with her husband Marcus in the corners of rooms, the sudden interest in Richard's will after years of indifference, it all painted a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The inheritance was substantial. $36 million accumulated through Richard's successful construction business and wise investments over 4 decades. Money we had planned to enjoy together in retirement, money meant to secure both our futures and leave something meaningful for Victoria and her children. Instead, it became the weapon she would use to destroy what was left of our family. As I watched the movers load the last of my possessions into their truck, Victoria stood in the doorway of what used to be our family home, arms crossed, wearing an expression I had never seen before, pure contempt mixed with triumph. "The house is mine now, Mother. Everything is mine. Daddy left it all to me because he knew I would take better care of it than you ever could." Her words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. This was not just about money or property. This was about erasing me from the narrative of our family's success, reducing my 3 decades of contribution to nothing more than an inconvenience to be discarded. But Victoria had made one critical mistake that would prove to be her downfall. She assumed that because I had been out of the legal world for a decade, I had somehow forgotten how to think like a lawyer. She assumed that grief and financial desperation had made me weak and compliant. Most importantly, she assumed she knew everything there was to know about her father's will. That night, as I sat in a budget motel room surrounded by boxes containing the remnants of my former life, I made a decision that would surprise everyone, including myself. I was not going to disappear quietly into the shadows of retirement poverty. I was not going to let my daughter's greed and cruelty go unchallenged. And I was certainly not going to let her believe that 38 years of marriage and partnership meant nothing. The next morning, I would make a phone call that would change everything. But first, I needed to do something I hadn't done in 10 years. I needed to think like the lawyer I used to be, the woman who had never lost a case that mattered, the fighter who had earned her reputation by being underestimated by opponents who confused courtesy with weakness. Victoria thought she had won the war by winning the first battle. She had no idea that the real fight was just beginning, and she had chosen to battle someone who had been preparing for this moment longer than she could possibly imagine. If you're watching me now, subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Because what I discovered next would make Victoria's cruelty seem like child's play compared to the web of deception I was about to uncover. The next morning, I sat in my motel room with a cup of bitter coffee and my old leather portfolio that I hadn't opened in years. Inside were business cards yellowed with age, contacts from my legal career that Victoria assumed were irrelevant relics of my past. She was wrong about that too. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, even after all these years. Harrison and Associates, Patricia speaking. Patricia, this is Caroline Winthrop. I need to speak with James Harrison immediately. Tell him it's about the Winthrop estate and it's urgent. James Harrison had been my colleague, my mentor, and most importantly, my husband's longtime friend and legal advisor. If anyone knew the true details of Richard's will, it would be him. What Victoria didn't realize in her rush to claim her inheritance was that she had never actually read the complete document. She had only heard the portions that the executor chose to share during the initial reading. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in James's oak-paneled office, the same office where Richard and I had planned our estate 30 years ago. James looked older, grayer, but his sharp blue eyes still held the intelligence that had made him one of the most respected attorneys in the state. "Caroline," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "I heard about what happened yesterday. Victoria called my office demanding immediate transfer of all assets. She was quite aggressive." I leaned forward in my chair. "James, I need you to tell me everything. The complete will, not just the summary that was read at the funeral. Richard and I updated our estate planning several times over the years, and I need to know exactly what we decided." James opened a thick file and spread several documents across his mahogany desk. "Caroline, what I'm about to tell you is going to shock you, and I suspect it's going to shock Victoria even more when she finds out." My heart began to race, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you mean?" "Richard came to see me 3 months before he died. He was very specific about his concerns regarding Victoria's financial responsibility and her treatment of you during his illness. He made some very particular amendments to his will that Victoria is completely unaware of." The room seemed to spin slightly as James continued. "The $36 million does go to Victoria. That part is true. But there are conditions, Caroline. Very strict conditions that must be met, and if they're not met within 1 year of Richard's death, the entire inheritance reverts to you." I felt my breath catch in my throat. "What kind of conditions?" James put on his reading glasses and began to read directly from the document. "Victoria must demonstrate financial responsibility by maintaining employment or running a profitable business for the entire year following Richard's death. She must provide care and housing for you, Caroline, until your death or until you choose to live independently. And most importantly, she must treat you with the respect and dignity befitting the widow of Richard Winthrop and the woman who sacrificed her career to care for him." The implications hit me like a lightning bolt. "James, she's already violated 2 of those conditions. She threw me out of the house yesterday, and she quit her influencer work 6 months ago to live off what she thought was guaranteed inheritance money." James smiled grimly. "That's exactly what Richard suspected would happen. He knew Victoria better than she knew herself. He also knew you better than you apparently knew yourself, Caroline. He called you his secret weapon." I stared at the documents in disbelief. "Why didn't anyone tell me this yesterday?" "Because," James said, pulling out another document, "Richard's instructions were very specific. You were to be given 1 full year to observe Victoria's behavior and decide whether you wanted to invoke these conditions. He said, and I quote, 'Caroline is too good-hearted to destroy our daughter's future out of spite. But if Victoria proves herself to be the selfish, ungrateful person I fear she might become, Caroline will need that inheritance more than Victoria deserves it.'" Tears began to well up in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of gratitude, pride, and something I hadn't felt in months: hope. My husband had protected me even from beyond the grave. "There's more, Caroline." James handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Richard's distinctive handwriting. "He left this for you to read only if Victoria's behavior made these conditions necessary." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and read my husband's final words to me. "My dearest Caroline, if you're reading this, it means our daughter has shown her true colors, and you're probably feeling lost and betrayed. But I need you to remember who you are. You are Caroline Winthrop, the woman who built a legal career from nothing, who fought for justice when no one else would, who sacrificed everything for love. You are not a victim, my darling. You are a force that Victoria has foolishly underestimated. Show her what happens when someone challenges a woman who has survived everything we've survived together. I love you always, Richard. I looked up at James through my tears. How long do I have to decide? The conditions can be invoked at any time during the first year after Richard's death. That gives you 11 more months. But Caroline, he paused, his expression growing serious. Once you invoke these conditions, there's no going back. If Victoria fails to meet them, she loses everything. Are you prepared for that level of confrontation with your daughter? I thought about Victoria's cold eyes yesterday, her complete lack of remorse or gratitude for everything I had given up for our family. I thought about the 37 years of love and sacrifice she had dismissed with a wave of her hand. I thought about my husband's faith in my strength, even when I had forgotten I had any strength left. James, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I spent 10 years out of the legal world, but I never stopped being a fighter. Victoria wants to play games with her father's legacy? She's about to learn that she chose the wrong opponent. As I left James's office that afternoon, I had a plan forming in my mind. Victoria thought she had humiliated me into submission, but she had actually done something far more dangerous. She had awakened the lawyer I used to be, the woman who had never backed down from a fight when justice was on the line. The war Victoria had started was about to begin in earnest, and she had no idea that her most dangerous enemy was the mother she had just thrown away like garbage. I spent the next 3 days in that motel room, but I wasn't wallowing in self-pity. I was doing what I had always done best, building a case. My old legal instincts were returning like muscle memory, and I realized that if I was going to invoke those conditions in Richard's will, I needed ironclad evidence of Victoria's violations. The first thing I did was document everything. I wrote down every detail of that devastating day, the exact words Victoria had used, the witnesses present, the timeline of events. In my years as a corporate lawyer, I had learned that cases are won and lost on details, and I wasn't going to let Victoria's lawyers find any loopholes if this went to court. But I needed more than just my word against hers. I needed proof of her financial irresponsibility and evidence that her treatment of me wasn't just a moment of grief-induced anger, but a pattern of calculated cruelty. That's when I remembered something that made me smile for the first time in days. Victoria had always been obsessed with documenting her life on social media. If she was living recklessly with her inheritance money, if she was flaunting her newfound wealth while claiming I deserved nothing, she would have posted about it. She couldn't help herself. I opened my laptop and began what I called digital reconnaissance. Victoria's Instagram account was public, obviously. She was an influencer who lived for attention and validation. What I found there made my blood boil, but also gave me exactly what I needed. 3 days after throwing me out of my home, Victoria had posted a photo of herself in an expensive restaurant, champagne glass raised, with the caption, "Finally free to live my life with my inheritance, no more dead weight holding me back. New life, freedom. Blessed, 30 million. Dead weight." She had called me dead weight. But the posts got worse. She had already purchased a brand new luxury car, a red Ferrari that cost more than most people's houses. She had booked a month-long vacation to Europe, staying in the most expensive hotels. She was shopping for jewelry that cost more than I had earned in entire years as a lawyer. More damaging to her case was what the posts revealed about her mindset. She wasn't treating this inheritance as a responsibility or a legacy to be preserved. She was treating it like lottery winnings, money to be spent on immediate gratification without any thought for the future. But the most incriminating evidence came from her Instagram stories, which she probably thought would disappear after 24 hours. I had screenshotted everything, including a video she had posted from inside what used to be our family home. "Look at this place," she had said, spinning around in the living room where Richard and I had celebrated 38 Christmas mornings. "Finally all mine. I'm thinking about gutting the whole thing and starting over. Clean slate, you know. Getting rid of all the old, outdated stuff that was bringing down the vibe." Old, outdated stuff. She was talking about erasing every trace of the life Richard and I had built together. The video continued with her in Richard's study, the room where he had spent countless hours building the business that made the inheritance possible. This depressing old office has got to go. I'm thinking of turning it into a wine cellar or maybe a social media studio, something fun and modern. I had to stop the video and take a deep breath. She wasn't just spending her father's money recklessly. She was actively destroying his memory, treating our family's history like an inconvenience to be erased. But Victoria's social media addiction was about to become her greatest weakness, because buried in her posts were details that would prove invaluable to my case. She had quit her influencer work completely, publicly announcing that she was retired at 28 and would never have to work again. She had posted receipts from shopping sprees, restaurant bills that exceeded my monthly budget, and vacation bookings that showed she was burning through money at an unsustainable rate. More importantly, her posts revealed her contempt for me specifically. She had shared screenshots of texts from concerned family members asking about my welfare, along with her responses dismissing their concerns. "She'll be fine," she had written to my sister Margaret. "Mom always lands on her feet. Besides, she's got Social Security or whatever. Social Security or whatever." As if the woman who had sacrificed her career and financial security to care for her dying husband was just supposed to figure it out on her own. I printed every screenshot, organized them chronologically, and began building a file that would make any lawyer proud. But evidence of her social media recklessness was just the beginning. I needed to understand the full scope of her financial irresponsibility. That's when I decided to call in my first favor from the old days. Margaret Chen had been my paralegal for 15 years before she started her own private investigation firm. If anyone could help me uncover the details of Victoria's spending spree, it was Margaret. "Caroline Winthrop," Margaret said when she answered the phone, her voice warm with genuine affection. "I heard about Richard. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Margaret. But I'm calling because I need your help with something that might surprise you. I need you to investigate my daughter." There was a pause. "Victoria? What's going on?" I gave Margaret the abbreviated version of what had happened, and I could hear her getting angrier with each detail. "That ungrateful little—" she started, then caught herself. "Sorry, Caroline, but after everything you did for that family, I can't believe she would treat you that way. I need to know exactly how she's spending the inheritance money, Margaret. Bank records, credit card statements, any major purchases or investments. I need a complete financial picture of her behavior since she gained access to the funds." "Consider it done," Margaret said without hesitation. "I still have contacts at most of the major banks, and Victoria's not exactly being subtle about her spending if her social media is any indication. Give me a week and I'll have everything you need." As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of purpose, of power, of control over my own destiny. Victoria thought she had destroyed me, but she had actually done something far more dangerous. She had given me a reason to fight, and she had no idea that the woman she was fighting had never lost a battle that mattered. The investigation was just beginning, and already I could see the cracks in Victoria's seemingly perfect victory. She was about to learn that when you try to destroy someone who has spent decades building legal cases, you better make sure you haven't left any evidence behind. And Victoria, in her arrogance and social media obsession, had left evidence everywhere. Margaret's investigation moved faster than I had expected. Within 4 days, she called me with news that was both shocking and perfectly predictable, given Victoria's pattern of reckless behavior. "Caroline, you need to sit down for this," Margaret said, her voice tight with disbelief. "In the 3 weeks since Victoria gained access to the inheritance, she has spent over $2 million. $2 million, Caroline, on cars, jewelry, vacations, and get this, she put down a deposit on a second house in the Hamptons because she decided the family home wasn't glamorous enough for her new lifestyle." I felt my stomach drop. $2 million in 3 weeks? It gets worse. She's also loaned money to her husband Marcus for some cryptocurrency investment scheme that my sources tell me is basically legalized gambling. Another $500,000 gone. At this rate, she'll burn through the entire inheritance in less than 10 years, and that's assuming she doesn't increase her spending, which based on her recent purchases, she absolutely will. But Margaret had uncovered something even more damaging than Victoria's financial recklessness. "Caroline, I found something else. Victoria has been telling people a very different story about what happened between you two. She's been claiming that you became abusive and erratic after Richard's death, that she had to remove you from the house for her own safety. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't enough for Victoria to steal my home and my security. She was also trying to destroy my reputation, to paint me as the villain in our story. There's more, Margaret continued. She's been in contact with elder care facilities, supposedly looking for a place to put you. She's been telling them that you have early-stage dementia and can't be trusted to live independently. She's creating a paper trail that makes her look like a concerned daughter dealing with a difficult mother. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a calculated campaign to erase me completely, to rewrite our family history with Victoria as the long-suffering daughter and me as the burden she had heroically taken on. Margaret, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need you to document everything. Every lie she's told, every person she's told it to, every dollar she's spent. And I need you to do something else. I need you to help me prove that I'm anything but an incompetent old woman with dementia. That afternoon, I made my second strategic phone call. Dr. Sarah Goldman had been my physician for 20 years, and Richard's doctor during his final illness. If anyone could provide medical evidence of my mental competency, it was her. Caroline, Dr. Goldman said when I explained what I needed, this is outrageous. You're one of the sharpest people I know. Your cognitive function during Richard's illness was remarkable. You managed his complex medical care, coordinated with multiple specialists, handled insurance paperwork that confuses people half your age. I'd be happy to provide a comprehensive evaluation that will prove your mental competency beyond any doubt. Within 2 days, I had a complete medical and psychological evaluation documenting my perfect mental health, my sharp cognitive function, and my complete capability to manage my own affairs. Dr. Goldman had also provided a detailed letter explaining how I had been the primary caregiver for Richard, making complex medical decisions and managing his care with exceptional competence and dedication. But my most powerful ally came from a source I hadn't expected. Richard's business partner, David Morrison, called me on Thursday evening. Caroline, David's voice was heavy with emotion. I heard what Victoria did to you. I want you to know that everyone who knew you and Richard is absolutely disgusted by her behavior. But I'm calling because there's something you need to know about the business. David had been Richard's partner in the construction company for 25 years. He knew the true story of our family's financial success better than anyone, including Victoria. Victoria came to see me last week, David continued. She wants to sell her father's share of the business. She doesn't understand what Richard built, doesn't care about the employees who depend on us, doesn't give a damn about the legacy he spent 4 decades creating. She just sees dollar signs. This revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. The construction business wasn't just a source of income. It was Richard's life's work, his pride and joy, the thing he had built from nothing into one of the most respected companies in the region. Victoria was planning to destroy it for quick cash. David, can she legally do that? Technically, yes. Her inheritance includes Richard's 51% ownership stake. But Caroline, if she sells, it won't just hurt the business. It will destroy the livelihoods of 63 families who work for us. These people were loyal to Richard for decades. They deserve better than being sold off like inventory. David's call gave me more than just information. It gave me a moral imperative. This wasn't just about my personal justice anymore. Victoria's greed was threatening the legacy Richard had built and the families who depended on that legacy for their survival. There's something else, David said. Richard made me promise something before he died. He made me promise that if Victoria ever tried to destroy the business, I should make sure you knew that he had always considered you his true partner in everything he built. He said you sacrificed your career so he could build his, and you deserved credit for every success he achieved. That night, I sat in my motel room surrounded by evidence of Victoria's betrayal. But for the first time since that devastating day, I felt something stronger than hurt or anger. I felt the power that comes from having truth and justice on your side. Victoria thought she was fighting a broken, helpless woman with no resources and no allies. She had no idea that she was actually fighting someone who had spent decades building relationships based on trust, respect, and genuine care for others. While she had been focused on building her social media following, I had been building something far more valuable, a network of people who knew my character and would stand with me when it mattered. Margaret, Dr. Goldman, David, James Harrison. These weren't just professional contacts. These were people who had witnessed my integrity, my competence, and my dedication over many years. They knew who I really was, not the caricature Victoria was trying to create. Leave a like if you also believe that our reputation is built over decades but can be destroyed by those closest to us if we're not careful. Because what I discovered next about Victoria's plans would test every alliance I had built and every ounce of strength I had left. The real battle was about to begin, and Victoria was about to learn that when you declare war on someone's entire life's work, you better make sure they don't have an army of people ready to fight alongside them. Margaret's next call came at 7 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after Victoria had thrown me out of my home. Her voice was tight with anger, and I could tell she had been working through the night. "Caroline, I need you to meet me at my office immediately. What I've uncovered is bigger than we thought, and frankly, it's going to make you question everything you believed about your daughter." An hour later, I was sitting across from Margaret in her downtown office, looking at a conference table covered with bank statements, credit reports, phone records, and photographs. The evidence spread before me painted a picture so disturbing that I had to grip the arms of my chair to steady myself. "Victoria didn't just start planning this after Richard died," Margaret began, her voice grim. "She's been planning this for over a year. Look at this." She handed me a series of text messages between Victoria and Marcus, dated 8 months before Richard's death. My hands trembled as I read them. "Victoria, the doctors say Dad has maybe 6 months left. We need to start planning." Marcus, "Planning what?" Victoria, "How to get Mom out of the picture once Dad's gone. She's going to be a problem if she thinks she deserves any of the inheritance." Marcus, "Your dad loves her. He's not going to leave her with nothing." Victoria, "Then we'll make sure she can't access whatever he leaves her. Elderly people lose their mental capacity all the time. Very sad, but very convenient." I felt physically sick reading those words. While I was caring for her dying father, while I was sacrificing sleep and health to make his final months as comfortable as possible, Victoria was plotting to steal my future and destroy my reputation. "There's more," Margaret said, handing me another set of documents. "Victoria has been in contact with 3 different elder law attorneys, asking about the process for declaring someone mentally incompetent. She's been researching how to have you declared unable to manage your own affairs." The scope of Victoria's betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't a sudden decision made in grief or anger. This was a calculated, long-term plan to erase me from my own life. "But here's where it gets really interesting," Margaret continued, pulling out a financial analysis she had prepared. "Victoria's spending isn't random or impulsive like we initially thought. It's strategic. She's moving money as quickly as possible into assets that would be harder to recover if legal action were taken against her." Margaret showed me how Victoria had been purchasing jewelry, art, and luxury items that could be easily hidden or sold. She had opened offshore investment accounts and was transferring large sums to cryptocurrency wallets that would be nearly impossible to trace or freeze. She's not just spending recklessly, Caroline. She's laundering the inheritance, making it as difficult as possible for anyone to claw it back if her ownership were ever challenged. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Victoria wasn't just greedy. She was criminal. She knew her behavior violated the conditions in Richard's will, and she was actively working to make the money irretrievable before anyone could stop her. "There's something else," Margaret said, her voice growing even more serious. "I found evidence that Victoria has been forging your signature on various documents. Insurance forms, bank account closures, even a power of attorney document that would give her legal control over any assets you might have." She handed me photocopies of documents I had never seen before, all bearing what looked like my signature, but wasn't quite right. Victoria had been practicing my handwriting, preparing to take legal control of my life completely. "Margaret," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "she was planning to have me declared incompetent and then steal whatever small amount Richard might have left me directly. She wasn't just planning to inherit everything. She was planning to make sure I couldn't survive independently, even if I had resources. It gets worse, Caroline. I traced some of Victoria's recent communications, and she's been in touch with a very expensive private care facility, the kind of place where wealthy families put relatives they want to forget about. She's been discussing long-term placement for a family member with advancing dementia and behavioral issues. The picture was complete now, and it was more horrifying than I could have imagined. Victoria hadn't just wanted my inheritance, she had wanted to erase me completely. Her plan was to steal everything Richard had left me, have me declared mentally incompetent, and then warehouse me in an expensive care facility where I would be forgotten while she lived off the money that should have secured my future. She even researched facilities in other states, Margaret continued, places where you wouldn't have any local support network, where no one would question your family's decisions about your care. I thought about all the times during Richard's illness, when Victoria had visited, how she had watched me manage his complex medical needs, coordinate with doctors, handle insurance paperwork, and make difficult decisions about his care. She had seen my competence, my sharp mind, my complete capability, yet she had been planning all along to convince the world that I was mentally incompetent. There's one more thing, Carolyn, and this might be the most important piece of evidence we have. Margaret handed me a recording device. Victoria has been secretly recording conversations with you for months. She's been trying to create audio evidence that could be edited to make you sound confused or incompetent. My blood ran cold. I remembered several conversations where Victoria had seemed unusually persistent about getting me to repeat information, or where she had asked strange questions about dates and details I obviously knew perfectly well. She had been building a case against me while pretending to be a caring daughter. The good news, Margaret said, is that the recordings actually work in your favor. Your voice is clear, your responses are sharp and appropriate, and it's obvious that Victoria was leading you toward answers she could later claim showed confusion. Any competent attorney could prove these recordings were manipulated attempts at entrapment. As I sat in Margaret's office, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's calculated betrayal, I felt something I had never experienced before, a cold, focused fury that burned away every trace of motherly love and protective instinct I had ever felt for Victoria. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't even just about the inheritance. Victoria had been planning to destroy my mind, my freedom, my dignity, and my life itself. She had been planning to make me disappear while living off the fruits of everything Richard and I had built together. Margaret, I said, my voice steady and determined, I want you to prepare a complete dossier of everything we've found, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence, and then I want you to contact James Harrison and tell him that I'm ready to invoke the conditions in Richard's will. Are you sure, Caroline? Once we trigger this, there's no going back. Victoria will fight this with everything she has. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. Evidence of a betrayal so complete and calculated that it made me question whether I had ever really known my daughter at all. Victoria wants to fight? She's about to discover what happens when you try to destroy someone who has spent 40 years learning how to win battles that matter. She planned my destruction for a year, but she made one critical mistake. What's that? She assumed I would never find out the truth. She's about to learn that the mother she tried to erase is still very much alive, and I'm fighting for more than just money now. I'm fighting for justice. The next morning, I walked into James Harrison's office no longer as a grieving widow seeking answers, but as a woman preparing for war. Margaret accompanied me, carrying 3 thick folders containing every piece of evidence we had gathered. The transformation in my demeanor was so complete that James actually paused when he saw me. Caroline, he said, studying my face carefully, you look different, stronger. That's because I finally understand what we're really dealing with, James. This isn't a family dispute about inheritance. This is a criminal conspiracy that began while my husband was dying, and I'm not going to let Victoria get away with it. I spent the next 2 hours walking James through every piece of evidence Margaret had uncovered. With each revelation, his expression grew more serious, more professional, more focused. By the time I finished, he was no longer speaking to me as Richard's old friend. He was speaking to me as a fellow attorney planning a complex legal strategy. Caroline, what Victoria has done goes far beyond violating the conditions of Richard's will. Document forgery, elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, these are felony charges. We're not just talking about recovering an inheritance, we're talking about potential criminal prosecution. Good, I said without hesitation. Because what she planned to do to me wasn't just theft, it was kidnapping. She was going to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a facility while she stole everything I had ever worked for. James leaned back in his chair, his mind clearly working through the legal implications. Here's what we're going to do. First, we invoke the conditions in Richard's will immediately. Victoria has violated every single requirement. She's unemployed, she's financially irresponsible, and she's failed to provide you with appropriate care and housing. That gives us grounds to challenge her inheritance. But that's just the beginning, he continued. We're also going to file for a forensic accounting of every dollar she's spent since gaining access to the inheritance. We're going to freeze her assets to prevent further money laundering. And we're going to seek criminal charges for the document forgery and elder abuse. Margaret opened her second folder. I've already prepared preliminary paperwork for asset freezing orders. Caroline, if we move quickly, we can prevent Victoria from transferring more money offshore or converting it into assets that would be difficult to recover. There's something else we need to consider, James said. Victoria isn't going to accept this quietly. She's going to fight back. And based on everything you've told me about her planning and manipulation, she's going to fight dirty. We need to be prepared for her to escalate her attacks on your reputation and mental competency. That's when I revealed the final piece of my own strategic planning. James, I've been thinking about this for days, and I believe Victoria's greatest weakness is her arrogance and her need for public validation. Everything she does, she broadcasts on social media. Every lie she tells, every manipulation she attempts, she can't resist documenting for attention. I pulled out my phone and showed him Victoria's latest Instagram posts. In the past week, she had continued flaunting her expensive purchases, but more importantly, she had begun posting subtle attacks on my character. Vague references to family members who become difficult as they age, and sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect the people you love. She's already beginning her public campaign to paint me as an incompetent burden, I explained. But she's doing it on a platform that creates permanent, time-stamped evidence of her lies. Every post she makes gives us more ammunition. James smiled grimly. So we let her continue digging her own grave while we build our case. Exactly. But I want to do more than just respond to her attacks. I want to go on the offensive. Margaret looked intrigued. What do you have in mind? Victoria has been telling people that I'm mentally incompetent and potentially dangerous. I think it's time for me to demonstrate publicly just how competent and dangerous I actually am. Over the next 3 hours, we developed a comprehensive strategy that would attack Victoria's credibility on multiple fronts while building my own reputation as a competent, intelligent woman who had been systematically victimized by her own daughter. First, we would file all the legal paperwork simultaneously: the will contest, the asset freeze, the forensic accounting request, and the criminal complaints. The coordinated filing would prevent Victoria from having time to hide more assets or prepare counterattacks. Second, I would begin my own carefully managed public relations campaign. Not through social media like Victoria, but through the professional and social networks I had built over 40 years. I would tell my story to people who mattered: other lawyers, community leaders, longtime friends who knew my character and could vouch for my competency. Third, we would use Victoria's own social media posts against her. Margaret had been screenshotting everything, and we would use her documented spending spree and public statements as evidence of her financial irresponsibility and lack of respect for her father's memory. There's one more element to this strategy, I said, looking directly at James. I want to return to practicing law. James raised his eyebrows. Caroline, you've been out of practice for 10 years, but I've maintained my bar membership and my legal knowledge is still sharp. Victoria has been telling people that I'm a helpless old woman who can't take care of herself. I think it's time to remind everyone exactly who they're dealing with. What are you proposing? I want to represent myself in the will contest, with your guidance and support, of course, but as lead counsel on my own case. There's no better way to demonstrate mental competency than by successfully practicing law at the highest level. Margaret grinned. Caroline, that's brilliant. Victoria's been painting you as a victim who needs to be managed and controlled. You're going to show the world that you're actually a force to be reckoned with. More than that, I said, feeling the familiar rush of strategic thinking that I had missed for 10 years. Victoria's entire plan depended on me being isolated, helpless, and silent. She's about to discover that she's given me the motivation to become more powerful than I've ever been. James began pulling out legal forms and procedure manuals. If you're serious about this, Caroline, we need to get you back up to speed on current law and procedure. It's going to be intensive preparation. James, I said, my voice carrying the confidence I had thought was lost forever. I spent 40 years preparing for this fight without knowing it. Victoria wanted to test whether the woman who raised her was strong enough to survive her betrayal. She's about to get her answer. As I left James's office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Richard's illness began. The thrill of intellectual challenge, the satisfaction of building a winning strategy, the confidence that comes from having right and justice on your side. Victoria had declared war on my life, but she had made one fatal miscalculation. She had assumed that 10 years of caring for a dying husband had made me weak and dependent. She had no idea that those 10 years had actually made me stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever to fight for what mattered. The counterattack was about to begin, and Victoria was going to learn that when you try to destroy someone's entire existence, you better make sure they don't have the knowledge, resources, and determination to fight back. The legal preparation consumed every waking moment of the following week. James had arranged for me to use a small office in his firm, and I threw myself into research with an intensity that surprised even me. 10 years away from active practice meant catching up on new precedents, updated procedures, and changes in inheritance law. But my legal instincts were sharper than ever. Margaret had expanded her investigation beyond Victoria's financial crimes to include a comprehensive background check on Marcus, Victoria's husband. What she discovered added an entirely new dimension to our case. Caroline, Marcus isn't just Victoria's accomplice in spending the inheritance, Margaret explained, spreading new documents across my temporary desk. He's actually the mastermind behind the cryptocurrency investments, and he has a history of financial fraud that Victoria either doesn't know about or is willfully ignoring. The documents revealed that Marcus had been involved in 2 previous investment schemes that had collapsed, leaving investors with significant losses. He had managed to avoid criminal charges both times by claiming he was merely a victim of his business partner's deception. But the pattern was clear. Victoria didn't just marry a charming opportunist, Margaret continued. She married a career criminal who saw her inheritance as his next big score. Look at this timeline. Marcus began pressuring Victoria to accelerate her spending within days of Richard's death. He's the one who suggested the cryptocurrency investments, the offshore accounts, and the rapid conversion of cash into portable assets. This revelation transformed our understanding of the entire situation. Victoria wasn't just a greedy daughter who had betrayed her mother. She was being manipulated by a husband who was systematically looting her inheritance for his own benefit. Margaret, does Victoria know about Marcus's history? Based on the communication records I've accessed, I don't think she has any idea. Marcus has been very careful to present himself as a successful entrepreneur, and Victoria has been too blinded by the lifestyle he's enabled to ask hard questions about where his expertise comes from. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. So Victoria isn't just violating the conditions of Richard's will, she's being victimized by financial fraud at the same time she's victimizing me. Exactly. And Caroline, there's something else. I traced Marcus's recent activities, and he's been in contact with several individuals who specialize in helping people hide assets from legal challenges. He knows that Victoria's inheritance could be challenged, and he's been preparing for that possibility since before Richard died. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clearer. Marcus had married Victoria not out of love, but as part of a long-term plan to access her family's wealth. He had encouraged her worst impulses, fed her sense of entitlement, and guided her toward decisions that would benefit him while making her legally vulnerable. Margaret, I need you to dig deeper into Marcus's background. If he's done this before, there might be other victims willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. And I want to know everything about these asset-hiding specialists he's been consulting. While Margaret continued her investigation, I focused on the legal strategy that would become the foundation of our case. Working late into each evening in James's office, I crafted a will contest that was unlike anything I had written during my active practice years. This wasn't just a legal document. It was a narrative that told the complete story of Victoria's betrayal, Marcus's manipulation, and the systematic destruction of Richard's legacy. Every paragraph was designed to demonstrate not only the legal violations that had occurred, but the emotional and moral bankruptcy that had driven them. The will contest included detailed timelines showing how Victoria's behavior had violated each condition of Richard's inheritance. Her unemployment since receiving the money, her failure to provide appropriate care for me, her financially irresponsible spending, and most damaging of all, her complete disrespect for her father's memory and wishes. But I also included something that few will contests contain: a comprehensive analysis of the criminal conspiracy that had driven Victoria's actions, the document forgery, the elder abuse, the money laundering, and the systematic attempt to destroy my reputation and independence. "James," I said, showing him the completed draft, "this isn't just a will contest. It's a criminal prosecution disguised as a civil case." James read through the document carefully, his expression growing more impressed with each page. "Caroline, this is exceptional work. You haven't just caught up to current legal standards, you've exceeded them. This document would be impressive coming from an attorney at the height of their career." "That's because I am at the height of my career, James. I just didn't realize it until Victoria forced me to fight for my life." The final element of our legal arsenal came from an unexpected source. David Morrison called with news that would prove devastating to Victoria's credibility. "Caroline, I've been documenting every interaction I've had with Victoria regarding the business sale. She's been pressuring me to accelerate the timeline, and she's made some statements that I think you need to hear." David played a recording of his most recent conversation with Victoria. Her voice was sharp, impatient, and revealing. "David, I don't care about the employees or the company legacy or any of that sentimental garbage. I need cash, and I need it fast. If you won't help me sell, I'll find someone who will, and you'll be out of a job along with everyone else." The recording captured Victoria's complete disregard for everything Richard had built and everyone who depended on the business for their livelihood. More importantly, it demonstrated her urgent need for cash, behavior that suggested she knew her inheritance might be challenged. "There's more," David continued. "Victoria has been in contact with a company that specializes in rapid business liquidation. They're known for maximizing immediate cash value while destroying long-term business viability. She's planning to sell Richard's life's work to corporate raiders who will strip it for parts." I felt a surge of protective fury. Richard had spent 40 years building that business from nothing, creating jobs, contributing to the community, establishing a reputation for quality and integrity. Victoria was planning to destroy it all for quick cash to fund her lifestyle and Marcus's criminal schemes. "David, I need you to document every conversation, every proposal, every attempt Victoria makes to sell or liquidate the business. That evidence will be crucial to our case." As the week progressed, our legal arsenal grew stronger each day. Margaret's investigations uncovered more evidence of Marcus's criminal background and Victoria's financial recklessness. My legal research revealed precedents that strongly supported our position. David's documentation showed Victoria's complete disregard for Richard's legacy and values. But the most powerful weapon in our arsenal was something Victoria could never have anticipated: my own transformation from victim to prosecutor. Every hour I spent researching law, every document I drafted, every strategy I developed demonstrated beyond any doubt that I was not the incompetent old woman Victoria had tried to portray. By Friday evening, I was ready to file papers that would change everything. The will contest, the asset freeze orders, the criminal complaints, and the business protection injunctions were all prepared and coordinated for simultaneous filing. "Caroline," James said as we reviewed the final documents, "once we file these papers on Monday morning, Victoria's world is going to explode. Are you prepared for the fight that's coming?" I looked at the legal documents spread across the desk, documents that represented hundreds of hours of preparation, investigation, and strategic thinking. Documents that would prove to the world exactly who Caroline Winthrop really was. "James, Victoria spent a year planning to destroy my life. I've spent the last 2 weeks planning to save it. She's about to discover that when you declare war on someone's entire existence, you better make sure they don't have the skill, determination, and righteous anger to fight back harder than you ever imagined possible. If you want to know how my story ends, subscribe because what I'm going to tell next will surprise you. Monday morning was going to bring a reckoning that Victoria never saw coming, and the woman she had tried to erase was about to remind everyone exactly what happens when you underestimate a fighter who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, but I had never felt more energized or focused in my life. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked into the courthouse wearing my best navy suit, the same one I had worn to closing arguments in my most important cases 20 years ago. It still fit perfectly, and more importantly, it made me feel like the formidable attorney I had once been and was becoming again. James met me at the filing clerk's office with our coordinated legal assault ready for deployment. We had timed everything precisely. The will contest, asset freeze orders, criminal complaints, and business injunctions would all be filed within minutes of each other, creating a legal storm that would give Victoria no time to prepare counterattacks or hide additional assets. "Are you ready for this, Caroline?" James asked as we approached the clerk's window. "I've been ready for this fight longer than Victoria has been alive," I replied, handing over the first set of documents. Within 30 minutes, every piece of legal paperwork had been filed, stamped, and entered into the court system. By 10 o'clock, Victoria would receive simultaneous service of papers that would freeze her assets, challenge her inheritance, expose her criminal behavior, and protect Richard's business from her planned liquidation. But our legal filing was only the beginning of a carefully orchestrated strategy designed to expose Victoria's deception while demonstrating my own competence and credibility. At 11 o'clock, I had my first appointment of what I privately called my credibility tour. Dr. Sarah Goldman had arranged for me to undergo a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation by Dr. Michael Chen, one of the region's most respected experts in cognitive assessment. The evaluation would provide ironclad medical evidence of my mental sharpness and complete competency. Dr. Chen put me through 4 hours of the most rigorous cognitive testing I had ever experienced. Memory assessments, problem-solving exercises, attention and concentration tasks, executive function evaluations. Every aspect of mental competency was thoroughly examined and documented. "Mrs. Winthrop," Dr. Chen said as we concluded the testing, "your cognitive function is not just normal for your age, it's exceptional for any age. Your working memory, analytical reasoning, and executive function scores are in the 98th percentile. Anyone claiming you have cognitive impairment would be contradicting overwhelming medical evidence to the contrary. The written report would be available within 24 hours, providing legal documentation that would demolish any attempt Victoria might make to question my mental competency." From Dr. Chen's office, I drove directly to my next strategic appointment. Margaret had arranged for me to meet with Patricia Williams, the investigative reporter for the city's largest newspaper. Patricia specialized in exposing financial fraud and elder abuse, and she had been following Margaret's investigation with professional interest. "Mrs. Winthrop," Patricia said as we sat in her downtown office, "what your daughter has done represents one of the most calculated cases of family financial abuse I've encountered in 20 years of reporting. Would you be willing to go on the record with your story?" This was the moment I had been preparing for, the opportunity to tell my side of the story publicly, before Victoria could control the narrative with her lies and manipulation. "Patricia, I'm not just willing to go on the record, I'm eager to do it. My daughter has been telling people that I'm an incompetent old woman who can't be trusted to manage my own affairs. I think it's time for everyone to hear from that supposedly incompetent woman directly." The interview lasted 2 hours and covered every aspect of Victoria's betrayal. Patricia was thorough, professional, and clearly outraged by what she was hearing. She had reviewed all of Margaret's evidence in advance, and her questions demonstrated that she understood both the legal complexity and the human tragedy of the situation. "Mrs. Winthrop, you're planning to represent yourself in the will contest. Isn't that unusual for someone your age who's been out of practice for 10 years? "Patricia, Victoria has been claiming that I'm mentally incompetent and unable to care for myself. I can't think of a better way to demonstrate her lies than by successfully practicing law at the highest level. If I can handle complex inheritance litigation, I think it's safe to say I can handle my own daily affairs. After the interview, Patricia walked me to the elevator with a promise that would prove crucial to our strategy. Mrs. Winthrop, your story will run in Sunday's edition with a follow-up investigative piece about family financial abuse. By next week, everyone in this city will know what really happened to you, and they'll know exactly how competent and intelligent you really are. My final appointment of the day was the most personally satisfying. I met with Rebecca Martinez, the dean of the local law school, who had offered me something I hadn't expected, a chance to return to the legal profession in a way that would publicly demonstrate my competence while helping others. Carolyn, Rebecca said, reviewing my recent legal work, we've been looking for someone to teach a course on elder law and inheritance litigation. Your current case represents exactly the kind of real-world expertise our students need to understand. Would you consider joining our faculty as a visiting lecturer? The offer was perfect for our strategy. Teaching law would provide ongoing public evidence of my mental sharpness and professional competence. It would also give me a platform to discuss elder abuse and family financial fraud, turning my personal tragedy into an educational opportunity that could help others. Rebecca, I would be honored to accept that position. When can I start? How about next week? I'd like you to begin with a seminar on family inheritance disputes, using your own case as a teaching tool. As I drove back to my hotel that evening, I reflected on how completely the situation had changed in just 2 weeks. Victoria had thrown me out of my home, expecting me to disappear quietly into poverty and obscurity. Instead, she had triggered a transformation that was making me more publicly visible, professionally active, and legally powerful than I had been in years. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that while I had been building my credibility and preparing my legal assault, Victoria had been continuing the reckless behavior that would ultimately destroy her case. Margaret's surveillance had documented additional expensive purchases, more evidence of financial irresponsibility, and increasingly desperate attempts to convert inheritance money into untraceable assets. Most importantly, Victoria's social media posts had become increasingly erratic and revealing. Her latest Instagram stories showed her at expensive restaurants and luxury hotels, but her captions revealed growing anxiety about family drama and legal complications that she claimed were totally unfounded harassment. She was beginning to crack under the pressure of maintaining her lifestyle while dealing with the legal challenges we had launched. Every post made her look more unstable, more irresponsible, and more guilty of the charges we had filed against her. That evening, James called with news that confirmed our strategy was working perfectly. Caroline, Victoria's attorney, contacted me this afternoon. She's demanding an immediate settlement conference, claiming that our legal action is frivolous harassment of a grieving daughter. She wants to resolve everything quietly without going to trial. I smiled grimly. Victoria wants to settle? That means she knows she's going to lose if this goes to court. It also means our asset freeze is preventing her from continuing to hide money offshore. She's probably discovering that having your accounts frozen is very inconvenient when you're accustomed to unlimited spending. James, tell Victoria's attorney that I'm not interested in any settlement that doesn't include full restoration of the inheritance conditions and criminal prosecution for the document forgery and elder abuse. She wanted to play hardball when she thought I was helpless. Now she can deal with the consequences. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that Victoria's trap had been perfectly set. She had spent months planning to destroy my reputation, steal my security, and erase me from my own life. But in her arrogance and greed, she had given me everything I needed to fight back more effectively than she could have imagined. Tomorrow would bring the first direct confrontation since that devastating day when she threw me out of my home. But this time, I wouldn't be the helpless victim she expected. I would be the formidable opponent she had created through her own betrayal. Victoria's reaction to our legal assault came faster and more dramatically than even I had anticipated. By Tuesday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the papers were served, she was standing in James Harrison's reception area, demanding an immediate meeting. Margaret called to warn me she was on her way up. Caroline, Victoria is here, and she's not alone. Marcus is with her, along with someone who looks like an expensive attorney. She's furious, scared, and desperate. Be ready for anything. When Victoria walked into James's conference room, I barely recognized the woman who had thrown me out of my home 3 weeks earlier. Gone was the confident, dismissive daughter who had called me dead weight. In her place was someone who looked haggard, anxious, and barely controlling her rage. "Mother," she said, her voice tight with barely suppressed fury, "what the hell do you think you're doing?" I remained seated, calm and composed, wearing my professional suit and surrounded by the legal documents that represented hundreds of hours of preparation. The contrast between us was stark and intentional. "I'm protecting your father's legacy and enforcing the conditions of his will, Victoria. The same conditions you've been violating since the day he died." Marcus stepped forward, his charm replaced by something much uglier. "This is harassment, Caroline. Victoria is grieving her father, and you're attacking her when she's most vulnerable." I looked at Marcus with the cold assessment I had once reserved for opposing counsel who tried to intimidate me in depositions. "Marcus, I know exactly who you are and what you've been doing. Your previous investment schemes, your criminal associates, your systematic looting of my daughter's inheritance. Did you really think I wouldn't discover the truth?" The color drained from Marcus's face. He clearly hadn't expected me to know about his background or his role in Victoria's financial crimes. Victoria's attorney, an impeccably dressed woman named Sandra Kellerman, tried to regain control of the conversation. "Mrs. Winthrop, my client is prepared to offer a reasonable settlement that would avoid the expense and publicity of prolonged litigation." "I'm listening," I said, though I had no intention of accepting any settlement that didn't include complete accountability for Victoria's actions. "Victoria is willing to provide you with a monthly allowance of $5,000 and assistance finding appropriate senior housing. In exchange, you would withdraw all legal challenges to her inheritance and agree not to pursue any criminal charges." The audacity of the offer was breathtaking. Victoria was willing to give me a tiny fraction of what Richard had intended me to have, while keeping the $36 million she had already proven herself incapable of managing responsibly. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, my voice carrying the steel I had perfected during decades of litigation. "Victoria violates every condition of her father's will, commits multiple felonies including document forgery and elder abuse, systematically destroys her father's business legacy, and in exchange for avoiding the consequences of her criminal behavior, she's willing to give me the equivalent of a modest pension." "Mother," Victoria said, her voice cracking slightly, "I'm being generous. You could have ended up with nothing." "Victoria, I did end up with nothing. You threw me out of my home with nowhere to go and no resources to survive. You've been telling people I'm mentally incompetent and dangerous. You've been planning to have me locked away in a care facility while you and Marcus steal everything your father worked 40 years to build." Victoria's facade finally cracked completely. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I never planned to hurt you." "Really?" I pulled out Margaret's file and placed a transcript of Victoria's text messages on the table. "Would you like me to read your conversations with Marcus about getting me out of the picture and how elderly people lose their mental capacity all the time?" Victoria's eyes widened as she recognized her own words. "Where did you get those?" "Victoria, I spent 40 years as an attorney. Did you really think you could commit crimes against me without leaving evidence? Did you think I wouldn't fight back when you tried to destroy my life?" Marcus leaned forward aggressively. "Those text messages were taken illegally. They can't be used in court." I smiled at him with the confidence of someone who knew the law better than he did. "Marcus, those messages were obtained through perfectly legal investigative methods. But more importantly, they're just the beginning of the evidence we have against you both." I nodded to Margaret, who opened her second folder and spread additional documents across the table. Bank records showing Victoria's reckless spending, evidence of Marcus's criminal background, documentation of the systematic money laundering they had been conducting together. "This is what 40 years of legal experience looks like when someone tries to destroy everything I've worked for," I said, gesturing to the overwhelming documentation of their crimes. "Victoria, you wanted to test whether your mother was strong enough to survive your betrayal. Congratulations, you've gotten your answer." Sandra Kellerman reviewed the evidence with growing alarm. It was clear she hadn't realized the full scope of what her clients had done, or the strength of the case against them. "Mrs. Winthrop," she said carefully, Perhaps we should discuss a more comprehensive settlement arrangement. There will be no settlement, I said firmly. Victoria has spent 3 weeks telling everyone who will listen that I'm an incompetent old woman who can't be trusted to manage my own affairs. Next week, I'll be representing myself in court to prove exactly how incompetent she thinks I am. Victoria finally exploded. You can't represent yourself. You've been out of practice for 10 years. You'll embarrass yourself. Victoria, in the past 3 weeks, I've written legal briefs that impressed experienced attorneys, undergone neuropsychological testing that proved my cognitive function is exceptional, given interviews to investigative reporters, and accepted a position teaching law at the university. If that's what mental incompetence looks like, I'd hate to see what you consider competent. The revelation that I was returning to teaching law hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her entire strategy had depended on painting me as a helpless victim who needed to be managed and controlled. The idea of me standing in front of law students, discussing complex legal concepts, and using our case as a teaching tool destroyed that narrative completely. Mrs. Winthrop, Sandra said desperately, surely we can reach some accommodation that serves everyone's interests. I stood up, gathering my documents with the practiced efficiency I had once used to end unsuccessful settlement conferences. Victoria made her choice when she decided I was dead weight to be discarded. She made her choice when she planned to have me declared incompetent and locked away. She made her choice when she decided to destroy everything her father built for quick cash to fund her lifestyle. I looked directly at Victoria, seeing not my daughter but the adversary she had chosen to become. You wanted to know if I was strong enough to survive what you did to me. You're about to find out that I'm not just strong enough to survive, I'm strong enough to ensure that justice is done. As I walked toward the door, Victoria called out desperately, "Mother, please, we're family." I paused and turned back to face her one final time. Victoria, family doesn't try to destroy each other for money. Family doesn't plot to have each other declared incompetent and imprisoned. Family doesn't erase 40 years of love and sacrifice for $36 million. We're not family anymore, Victoria. We're adversaries in a legal battle that you started, and I'm going to finish. The confrontation was over, but the real battle was just beginning. Victoria had seen the evidence against her, witnessed my transformation from victim to prosecutor, and realized that her plan to destroy me had backfired catastrophically. Now she knew exactly what she was fighting against, not a helpless old woman, but an experienced attorney with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The week following our confrontation brought a series of developments that escalated the conflict beyond anything I had anticipated. Victoria's desperation was driving her to increasingly reckless actions, while the legal and public pressure we had created was forcing her to reveal the true extent of her criminality. It started on Thursday morning when Margaret called with urgent news that would change everything. "Caroline, you need to get to my office immediately. Victoria has made a catastrophic mistake, and we need to move fast to take advantage of it." When I arrived at Margaret's office, I found her laptop open to Victoria's Instagram account, displaying a series of posts that could only be described as a complete public meltdown. "Look at what she posted last night," Margaret said, scrolling through a sequence of increasingly unhinged social media updates. The first post showed Victoria at an expensive nightclub, surrounded by bottles of champagne that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The caption read, "Celebrating my freedom from toxic family members who think they deserve my inheritance. Some people never learn that money talks and victim mentality walks. Freedom. My money. Moving on." But the posts grew progressively more revealing and damaging. In one video, clearly recorded while Victoria was intoxicated, she was laughing about stupid lawyers who think they can intimidate me, and boasting about moving money where no one can touch it. Most damaging of all was a live stream she had posted at 3 a.m, apparently from her bedroom, where she ranted about ungrateful mothers who don't know when to disappear, and made detailed threats about what she would do to destroy anyone who tries to steal what's mine. Margaret, she's basically confessing to financial crimes and making public threats. This isn't just evidence of poor judgment. This is evidence of criminal intent and consciousness of guilt. It gets worse, Caroline. Look at this video from 2 nights ago. Margaret played a video that Victoria had apparently recorded without realizing how much it revealed. In the background of her nightclub celebration, Marcus could be seen having an intense conversation on his phone, during which he said clearly enough for the camera to pick up, "The accounts in the Cayman Islands are secure, but we need to accelerate the timeline before the court freezes everything." Caroline, Victoria just provided us with evidence of international money laundering. This isn't just inheritance fraud anymore. This is federal criminal activity. But Victoria's social media self-destruction was only the beginning of her week of catastrophic mistakes. That afternoon, James called with news that demonstrated just how far Victoria was willing to go to protect her stolen inheritance. "Caroline, Victoria has filed a countersuit claiming that you're suffering from severe dementia and that all of our legal action represents elder abuse by unscrupulous attorneys taking advantage of your mental incapacity." The audacity was breathtaking, but the irony was even more striking. Victoria was claiming that the legal action she had forced me to take by stealing my inheritance and throwing me out of my home was actually evidence that I was being manipulated by others. James, let me guess, she's also claiming that she was trying to protect me from myself when she had me evicted and tried to have me declared incompetent. Exactly. Her countersuit portrays her as a loving daughter who was forced to take difficult action to protect her mother from predatory lawyers and bad financial decisions. She's asking the court to appoint a guardian for you and to dismiss all of our legal action as the product of your supposed mental incapacity. I felt a moment of cold fury at Victoria's continued attempts to destroy my reputation and independence, but then I realized something that made me smile for the first time in days. James, Victoria has just made the biggest strategic mistake of her life. What do you mean? She's challenging my mental competency in a legal proceeding where I'm representing myself. The judge is going to observe me directly, evaluate my legal arguments in person, and assess my cognitive function through my actual performance in court. She's giving me the perfect opportunity to prove publicly that her claims about my mental state are lies. That evening brought the final and most dramatic development of Victoria's week of self-destruction. Margaret called just as I was preparing for bed, with news that would prove to be the turning point in our entire case. "Caroline, Victoria has been arrested." "What?" "The FBI raided her house this afternoon. Apparently, Marcus's cryptocurrency investments weren't just reckless gambling. They were part of an international money laundering operation. When the federal agents started investigating the offshore accounts, they discovered that Victoria and Marcus have been moving inheritance money through the same financial networks used by organized crime. The implications were staggering. Victoria hadn't just violated the conditions of Richard's will. She had become involved in federal criminal activity that could result in decades in prison. Margaret, where is she now? She's been released on bond, but she's facing federal charges for money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Marcus is facing even more serious charges, including racketeering and connection to previous financial crimes. The inheritance money? Frozen by federal order pending investigation. Everything she moved offshore, every cryptocurrency investment, every hidden asset, it's all been seized as evidence in a federal criminal case. As I absorbed this news, I realized that Victoria's greed and Marcus's criminality had accomplished something our civil lawsuit never could have achieved. The federal government had done what Richard's will conditions were designed to do. They had stripped Victoria of access to the inheritance and demonstrated her complete unfitness to manage substantial financial resources. But the personal satisfaction of seeing justice done was tempered by a more complex emotion. This was still my daughter, the little girl I had raised and loved, and watching her destroy her life through her own choices was heartbreaking, even as it was necessary. The next morning brought a phone call that would test my resolve more than any legal challenge had. "Mother, please, I need your help." Victoria's voice was small, frightened, and completely different from the arrogant young woman who had thrown me out of my home a month earlier. She was calling from her attorney's office, facing the possibility of decades in federal prison, finally understanding the magnitude of what her greed had cost her. "Victoria, what do you want from me? I need character witnesses for my sentencing hearing. I need family members to tell the court that I'm not a criminal, that I made mistakes but I'm not a bad person. Mother, please, you're the only family I have left." The request was stunning in its irony. After spending months planning to destroy my reputation and have me declared incompetent, after throwing me out of my home and trying to steal everything Richard had left me, Victoria was asking me to save her from the consequences of her own criminal choices. Victoria, you called me dead weight. You tried to have me locked away in a care facility. You planned to erase me from my own life. Why would I help you now? Because I'm your daughter, she said, her voice breaking. Because despite everything that's happened, I'm still your little girl. I closed my eyes and thought about the little girl Victoria had been, before greed and Marcus's influence had corrupted her into someone I barely recognized. I thought about Richard and what he would want me to do. I thought about the difference between justice and revenge. Victoria, I'll consider testifying at your sentencing hearing, but only under one condition. Anything, Mother. Please. You have to tell the truth. About everything. About planning to destroy me, about the money laundering, about trying to have me declared incompetent. If you want my help, you have to face the full truth of what you've done and take responsibility for all of it. There was a long silence before Victoria finally spoke. I understand, Mother. I'll tell the truth. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the final chapter of our story was about to be written, and it would be more complex and emotionally challenging than anything that had come before. The courtroom was packed on the day of Victoria's sentencing hearing. The case had attracted significant media attention due to the combination of family betrayal, elder abuse, and international financial crimes. As I walked to the witness stand, I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching me, reporters, legal observers, and members of the public who had followed our story through Patricia Williams's investigative series. Victoria sat at the defendant's table, looking small and defeated, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had thrown me out of my home 2 months earlier. The federal charges had stripped away her arrogance, her sense of entitlement, and her belief that she could manipulate her way out of any consequences. Judge Rebecca Martinez, no relation to the law school dean, had a reputation for fairness, but also for holding white-collar criminals accountable for their actions. She had reviewed all the evidence in our case, including Victoria's social media posts, the money laundering charges, and the systematic elder abuse that had started everything. Mrs. Winthrop, Judge Martinez said as I was sworn in, you are here at the request of the defendant to provide character testimony. However, I understand that you were also the primary victim of the defendant's crimes. Please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant and the impact of her actions on your life. I looked directly at Victoria before I began speaking. She was crying silently, finally understanding the full magnitude of what her choices had cost not just her, but everyone who had loved her. Your Honor, Victoria Winthrop is my daughter, and for 28 years she was the center of my world. I sacrificed my legal career to raise her, supported her dreams, and gave her every advantage I could provide. When her father was dying, I gave up my financial security to care for him, believing that family takes care of family. I paused, collecting my thoughts and my emotions before continuing. But the woman sitting at that table is not the daughter I raised. The daughter I raised would never have planned to destroy her mother's life for money. She would never have tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal what little her father had left me. She would never have dishonored her father's memory by destroying the business he spent 40 years building. Judge Martinez leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Winthrop, despite everything the defendant has done to you, you agreed to testify on her behalf. Why? Because, Your Honor, I believe in the difference between justice and revenge. Victoria has committed serious crimes that deserve serious consequences, but she is also a young woman who was manipulated by her husband into choices that have destroyed her life. If she is willing to face the truth of what she's done and work to make amends, then she deserves a chance at redemption. I turned to look at Victoria directly. Your Honor, my daughter made terrible choices, but I believe she can learn from them. However, any mercy the court shows her must be contingent on her taking full responsibility for her actions and making genuine efforts to repair the damage she has caused. The prosecutor then called me back to testify about the systematic nature of Victoria's crimes and their impact on my life. This testimony was more difficult, as it required me to detail the calculated cruelty of her plan to erase me from my own existence. Mrs. Winthrop, the prosecutor asked, In your professional opinion as an attorney, how would you characterize the defendant's actions toward you? They constitute a systematic conspiracy to commit elder abuse, financial fraud, and what amounts to kidnapping. Victoria didn't just steal money, she attempted to steal my freedom, my dignity, and my identity. She planned to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so she could steal everything I had ever worked for. And how has this impacted your life? I lost my home, my financial security, and for a time, my faith in family bonds. But I also discovered that I was stronger than I had realized. Victoria's attempts to destroy me actually forced me to rebuild my life and return to the legal profession I loved. In trying to erase me, she reminded me of who I really was. When it was time for Victoria to address the court, she stood with her attorney and began what would prove to be the most honest moment of the entire ordeal. Your Honor, I want to start by acknowledging that everything my mother has told you is true. I did plan to destroy her life for money. I did try to have her declared incompetent. I did dishonor my father's memory and legacy. I did commit the crimes I'm charged with. Victoria's voice grew stronger as she continued. I was greedy, entitled, and cruel. I convinced myself that I deserved my inheritance more than my mother deserved her security. I let my husband manipulate me into criminal activity because I wanted the lifestyle his schemes could provide. She turned to face me directly. Mother, I can't undo what I've done to you. I can't give you back the months of fear and uncertainty I caused. I can't repair the trust I destroyed. But I want you to know that I understand now what I threw away. I didn't just lose an inheritance. I lost the most important person in my life because of my own greed and cruelty. Judge Martinez listened carefully to all the testimony before announcing her decision. Ms. Winthrop, you have committed serious federal crimes that normally would result in a lengthy prison sentence. However, your willingness to accept responsibility, combined with your mother's testimony about your potential for redemption, leads me to impose a sentence that balances accountability with the possibility of rehabilitation. You are sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You will also pay full restitution to all victims of your financial crimes, perform 1,000 hours of community service focused on elder abuse prevention, and surrender any claim to the inheritance that was the source of these crimes. The judge then addressed the inheritance directly. Regarding the estate of Richard Winthrop, this court finds that Victoria Winthrop has violated every condition of her inheritance through her criminal actions. The full inheritance, as specified in the will's alternative provisions, now passes to Caroline Winthrop, who has demonstrated beyond any doubt her competency to manage these assets responsibly. As the hearing concluded, Victoria was led away to begin her prison sentence. But before the bailiffs took her away, she was allowed a final moment with me. Mother, she said, tears streaming down her face, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope someday you might find it in your heart to give me a chance to earn it. I looked at my daughter, broken, defeated, but perhaps finally honest, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not forgiveness yet, but the possibility of it. Victoria, forgiveness is earned through actions, not words. Serve your sentence, learn from your mistakes, and when you're released, we'll see what kind of person you've chosen to become. As I left the courthouse that day, I realized that justice had been served in ways that extended far beyond the legal system. Victoria would face the consequences of her choices, but she would also have the opportunity to rebuild her life based on truth rather than greed and manipulation. The inheritance was returned to its rightful place, Richard's business was protected from liquidation, and Victoria's lies about my mental competency had been exposed in the most public way possible. But perhaps, most importantly, I had rediscovered who I was beneath the grief and betrayal. I wasn't just a victim of family financial abuse. I was a woman who had fought back and won, who had transformed personal tragedy into professional resurrection, and who had proven that it's never too late to reclaim your power and dignity. Remember what I learned. Our age is our greatest strength, not our weakness. Subscribe if you believe that too. 6 months have passed since Victoria's sentencing, and I'm writing this final chapter from my office at the law school, where I've been teaching elder law and inheritance litigation to students who often remind me why I fell in love with the legal profession in the first place. The irony isn't lost on me that Victoria's attempt to destroy my career actually led to its renaissance. The inheritance has been fully restored, and I've used it in ways that honor Richard's memory while building something meaningful for the future. The first thing I did was establish the Richard Winthrop Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention, which provides legal assistance to older adults who are being financially exploited by family members. Every week, I receive calls from people whose children are trying to steal their inheritance, have them declared incompetent, or manipulate them into signing away their assets. David Morrison and I have restructured Richard's construction business as a worker-owned cooperative, ensuring that the employees who helped build the company will benefit from its continued success. It's growing stronger than ever, proving that businesses built on integrity and respect for workers can thrive when they're protected from the greed of people like Victoria and Marcus. Marcus, by the way, is serving a 15-year federal sentence for his role in the money laundering conspiracy. The FBI investigation revealed that he had targeted Victoria specifically because of her family's wealth, and that their marriage was essentially a long-term financial crime. Victoria has filed for divorce and renounced any connection to his criminal enterprises. I've also returned to limited legal practice, taking cases that matter to me rather than chasing billable hours. Last month, I helped a 70-year-old woman whose son was trying to force her into a nursing home so he could sell her house. 2 weeks ago, I represented a man whose daughter had stolen his retirement savings for her business ventures. The skills I rediscovered fighting Victoria's betrayal have helped dozens of other families avoid the destruction we experienced. But perhaps the most meaningful change has been in my relationship with the concept of family itself. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relationships, it's about the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. Margaret, James, Dr. Goldman, David, and even Patricia Williams have become my chosen family, bound together by shared values rather than shared genetics. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter from Victoria in prison. She's been participating in financial crimes rehabilitation programs and working with elder abuse prevention organizations to understand the impact of crimes like hers. She wrote that she finally comprehends the magnitude of what she tried to steal from me. Not just money, but dignity, independence, and identity itself. Mother, she wrote, I understand now that when I tried to have you declared incompetent, I wasn't just attacking your finances, I was attacking your very sense of self. I tried to erase the strong, intelligent woman who raised me because her strength made me feel weak. I'm learning in therapy that my greed was really about my own insecurity and fear that I would never measure up to what you and Dad accomplished. She asked if she could call me, and after much consideration, I said yes. Our first conversation was stilted, careful, but honest. She's beginning to understand that rebuilding our relationship will take years of consistent actions, not just words of apology. I know I have no right to ask this, she said during our second call, but I hope that, when I'm released, you might consider letting me work for the foundation. I want to spend my life helping other families avoid what I put you through. I told her that forgiveness is a process, not a destination, and that earning back trust requires demonstrating change through actions over time. But I also told her that I believe in the possibility of redemption for people who are willing to do the hard work of becoming better. The most important lesson I've learned through this ordeal is that our response to betrayal defines us more than the betrayal itself. Victoria chose greed over love, manipulation over honesty, cruelty over compassion. But I chose to fight back rather than disappear, to rebuild rather than retreat, to seek justice rather than revenge. I've also learned that age is indeed our greatest strength, not our weakness. The wisdom that comes from decades of experience, the networks built through years of professional relationships, the resilience developed through surviving life's challenges. These are assets that can't be stolen or destroyed by someone else's greed. Young people like Victoria often assume that older adults are vulnerable, helpless, or easily manipulated. They see our kindness as weakness, our trust as naivety, our love as something to be exploited rather than cherished. Victoria learned the hard way that underestimating someone based on their age is a dangerous mistake. The legal profession has welcomed me back with respect and admiration for the case I built against Victoria. Several colleagues have told me that my self-representation in such a complex matter demonstrates the highest levels of legal competency and strategic thinking. The judge in our case specifically noted that my performance in court proved beyond any doubt that Victoria's claims about my mental capacity were not just false, but maliciously fabricated. Last week, I was invited to speak at a national conference on elder abuse prevention. My story has become a case study in how older adults can fight back against family financial exploitation. The audience of attorneys, social workers, and law enforcement officials gave me a standing ovation when I concluded with the words that have become my personal motto. When someone tries to erase you from your own life, the most powerful response is to become more visible, more active, and more determined than they ever imagined possible. As I finish writing this account, I want to leave you with the most important message I can share. If you're facing betrayal by someone you trusted, if you're being told you're too old or too vulnerable to fight back, if someone is trying to steal your independence or dignity, remember that you have more power than you realize. Document everything. Seek professional help. Trust your instincts and never accept someone else's assessment of your limitations. The person who raised children, built careers, survived decades of life's challenges, and accumulated wisdom through experience is not suddenly incompetent because someone wants to steal what you've earned. Victoria thought she was destroying a helpless old woman. Instead, she awakened a force she couldn't comprehend and couldn't defeat. Your betrayers may think they know who you are, but they're probably about to discover that they've underestimated someone who has been preparing for this fight longer than they've been alive. In the comments, tell me your story. This is a safe space for those who have gone through family betrayals like I have. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power, rebuild your life, and remind the world exactly who you are. The daughter who tried to erase Caroline Winthrop learned that she had actually awakened her. And Caroline Winthrop is stronger now than she has ever been.